Under the warm spring sun of April 1945, an island in the Pacific prepared to become the stage for one of the most brutal battles in human history. Okinawa, a place of lush hills and turquoise seas, soon became a graveyard for hundreds of thousands. This was not just another clash of armies. It was the last great battle of the Pacific War, the place where steel, fire, blood decided the fate of Japan and, in many ways, the future of the modern world. The Battle of Okinawa has been called the Typhoon of Steel, and for good reason. It was the deadliest campaign of the Pacific, a fight that cost more lives than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. But why did this tiny island, just 60 miles long, matter so much? And how did it descend into a nightmare of unimaginable suffering? That's the story we are about to unfold. By the spring of 1945, Japan's empire was collapsing. 4 years earlier, its navy had roared across the Pacific, capturing vast territories. But America had fought back, launching the island-hopping campaign that pushed Japanese forces westward. Battles at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima had shown the world just how ferociously the Japanese would defend even the smallest islands. The closer the Americans came to Japan, the bloodier the resistance grew. Okinawa was the final step before the home islands, just 400 miles from Kyushu. It was the last shield between the United States and Japan itself. Whoever controlled Okinawa would control the seas and skies around Japan. For Tokyo's leaders, Okinawa was more than just territory. It was part of the Japanese homeland, tied to their empire's identity. To lose it would be to open the gates to invasion. General Masaru Ushijima, commander of the Japanese 32nd Army, was tasked with defending the island. A calm and disciplined man, Ushijima understood the grim reality. His army could not hope to defeat America's overwhelming firepower, but he could make them bleed. Beside him stood General Isamu Cho, his fiery and impulsive chief of staff, who believed in dying gloriously rather than surrendering. Their contrasting personalities shaped the battle. Ushijima preferred careful defense, while Cho pushed for reckless counterattacks. Beneath them were tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers, many young and untested, as well as Okinawan conscripts and civilians forced into service. The Japanese dug deep.
We need to secure this position
Literally.
before nightfall.
They built miles of tunnels and bunkers into the limestone
Rock
hills.
is dense here.
The Shuri Line, a defensive fortress stretching across southern Okinawa, was their masterpiece. Here, artillery was hidden in caves, connected by underground passages. Soldiers could vanish into the earth and reappear elsewhere, frustrating American attacks. Villages were fortified. Hills became fortresses. Civilians were ordered to resist or die. The entire island was prepared to become a giant trap. On the other side, the United States gathered an armada unlike anything the Pacific had seen. Over 1,500 ships, carrying 180,000 Marines and Army soldiers, assembled under Admiral Chester Nimitz and Admiral Raymond Spruance. General Simon Believer Buckner Jr., son of a Confederate general from the American Civil War, commanded the ground forces. Alongside him were battle-hardened divisions of Marines who had stormed beaches from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima. They knew what awaited them: caves, artillery, and a fanatical enemy. But no one could truly imagine the storm that was about to break. On April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday and April Fool's Day, the invasion began. Waves of Marines and soldiers poured onto the Hagushi beaches. Expecting a slaughter, many braced for machine gun fire and artillery. Instead, they were met with silence. A few scattered shots, but no massive defense. Within hours, tens of thousands of Americans were ashore. Some joked it was a trick, others thought Japan had abandoned the island. They couldn't have been more wrong. Ushijima had simply lured them in. The real battle waited further south, while the Americans secured the northern half of the island with relative ease. They soon turned south toward the Shuri Line. There, everything changed. The first clashes were fierce, but nothing compared to the grinding slaughter that followed. Hills like Kakazu Ridge, Sugarloaf Hill, and Shuri Castle became names etched in blood. American troops attacked again and again, only to be driven back by hidden machine guns. artillery fire, and night counterattacks. Each ridge had to be taken at terrible cost. One Marine remembered charging up a hill only to see his entire squad cut down in seconds. Another recalled the sickening stench of bodies rotting in the mud, too dangerous to retrieve under fire. Meanwhile, at sea, the Japanese launched a new kind of terror, the kamikaze. Waves of suicide planes hurled themselves at the U.S. fleet. Destroyers and carriers exploded in flames as pilots willingly turned themselves into human bombs. In one raid alone, hundreds of kamikazes swarmed the fleet, sinking ships and killing thousands of sailors. Admiral Spruance later admitted the sheer intensity of these attacks nearly broke the Navy's nerves. One American officer described watching a kamikaze dive straight into a transport ship, saying, "It was as if the sun itself had fallen into the sea." Okinawa became the largest kamikaze campaign of the war. Among the Americans, individual stories of endurance stand out. Medal of Honor recipients like Corporal Desmond Doss, devout medic who refused to carry a weapon, saved over 70 men at Hacksaw Ridge, lowering them down a cliff under fire. His courage became legendary, a symbol of humanity amid horror. Marines fought with flamethrowers, grenades, and sheer grit, clearing caves one by one. Soldiers wrote home about mud that swallowed boots, rain that never stopped, fear that haunted their every step. For the Okinawan people, the battle was a nightmare without escape. Civilians hid in caves only to be buried alive by shelling. Families were caught between Japanese troops who used them as shields and Americans who shelled everything that moved. Japanese propaganda told Okinawans that Americans would torture and kill them, driving some to leap off cliffs in despair. Mothers were seen holding their children as they jumped into the sea. In total, up to 150,000 Okinawan civilians, nearly one-third of the population, perished. Their suffering remains one of the darkest chapters of the war. Fighting dragged on into May and June. The Shuri Line finally cracked after weeks of relentless bombardment. American tanks rolled over shattered defenses. Shuri Castle, once a proud Ryukyuan palace, was reduced to rubble. Yet still, the Japanese fought, retreating south to make their last stand. General Cho urged one final counterattack, but Ushijima refused, knowing it would be futile. Instead, as the end drew near, he prepared to die with honor. On June 22, 1945, Ushijima and Cho committed ritual suicide near their headquarters, leaving behind farewell messages praising their soldiers' sacrifice. Their deaths marked the collapse of organized resistance. The Battle of Okinawa was over, but the cost was almost beyond comprehension. More than 12,000 Americans were killed, with another 50,000 wounded. The Japanese lost over 100,000 soldiers, virtually their entire defending army. And the civilians, men, women, children, suffered casualties greater than either side's military. Altogether, nearly 300,000 lives were lost in less than 3 months. Okinawa was not just a battle, it was an apocalypse. Its consequences were immediate and far-reaching. For us leaders, Okinawa was proof that invading Japan would be catastrophic. If a single island could cost this much, what would happen on the home islands? Estimates suggested 1 million Allied casualties and untold millions of Japanese dead. These calculations weighed heavily when the atomic bomb became an option. In a chilling sense, the road from Okinawa led directly to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For Japan, Okinawa was both a tragedy and a warning. The battle demonstrated the courage of its soldiers, but also the futility of resistance. It exposed the weakness of Japan's defenses and foreshadowed the devastation that awaited the homeland. And for Okinawans, the scars never fully healed. The island remained under U.S. occupation for decades after the war, and even today. The memory of 1945 is etched into its identity. The Battle of Okinawa was the climax of the Pacific War's brutality. It was a clash of wills, where soldiers fought to the last bullet and civilians were swept into the storm. It was a battle where heroes like Desmond Doss shone, but also where humanity's darkest impulses, fanaticism, suicide tactics, total war, were unleashed. It showed the world what modern war looked like when fought without restraint. And so, Okinawa stands as both a victory and a tragedy. It was the final step before Japan's surrender, but at a cost so immense it haunts history. The Pacific War ended weeks later, but its last battle reminds us of the price paid when nations collide with everything they have. A paradise turned into hell, an island drenched in blood. Okinawa's story is one that must never be forgotten.